Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
The Jets offense is what we thought it would probably be without Aaron Rodgers with Zach Wilson. The defense was not, as the Cowboys took apart the Jets on both sides of the ball. So now what? We're going to get into it. I'm Tim McMaster, along with the Athletics Jets reporter, Zach Rosenblatt. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, the podcast. Give us the great reviews wherever you can, the thumbs up, all that stuff. We certainly appreciate it. We're going to get into Zach Wilson. We'll break down his game, the good, the bad of that, and the other issues facing this team right now, and some possible solutions to go with it. We'll check in on the pick segment. The first time we've done picks with every game. We'll take a look at the leaderboard, and we'll take some of your questions as well. So lots to get to. Zach, Micah Parsons ate on Sunday, but maybe the only person who ate better this weekend in Dallas was you, right?
Oh, nice. That was good. Yeah, we went to, there's a famous barbecue place called, I think I might have mentioned it last week. There's a place called Pecan Lodge. It's like one of the more famous spots in Dallas. It was fantastic. While I was in line, a Can't Wait listener wearing a full cowboy hat, not Cowboys, a cowboy hat, was talking to me about the pod. That was nice. Ran into a couple Jets fans in Dallas. They were all over the place. But yeah, the barbecue is great. It's kind of Texas barbecue. When you eat it, it's like you need like a full day to recover. Like I just felt like I was full for like 2 straight days after eating it. I was disappointed they didn't have their burnt ends, which is what they're known for. They ran out.
Everyone runs out of burnt ends.
Yeah, that's it's because you got to get there when the place opens for that kind of, because they probably only have a certain amount of it. But barbecue's fantastic. Dallas is a sneaky fun city if you go like downtown in the Deep Ellum area. I used to cover obviously the NFC East for 4 years with the Eagles and Giants. And I kind of always dreaded going to Dallas just because like everything's so spread out there, and I didn't have anyone guiding me to the cool parts of it. But yeah, if you go in the downtown area, there's some cool bars and it's fun. So I mean, it's not like the Jets are going to play there for a while now, but yeah, that was a fun trip. Now the Jets don't travel again until the Broncos game, and then after that, it's not for a while because they have a bye week, and the Giants game is technically a road game, so that kind of steals the road game. So I think they don't travel till Vegas after that. So curious to see how many Jets fans will be in Vegas, because that should be a fun trip.
Yeah, that'll be good. Denver's always a fun trip. You have
I love Denver.
Trips. Yeah, decent trips this year for sure. All right, let's get into the game. It did not go well. I mean, I was surprised at the defensive effort, and we'll get to that obviously. But let's start with Zach Wilson, because it's how we've been starting this podcast for like 3 years now. It felt like this year was going to be different, Zach, but here we go. And
Marissa's in the chat.
Oh, Marissa's in the chat. We also sent her a link. She's
not coming on today. She said she might come later in the week. She's in her pajamas right now. She's doing mom stuff. But say hi to Marissa, everybody.
Yeah, say hi, and Marissa, feel free to stir the pot in the comment section for sure. The Zach Wilson was not the problem. Let's start there, right? Like he wasn't great. He threw 3 picks.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say 2 of them you could almost throw out because it was late in the game where they had to do something. So he's going to obviously take chances at that point. He had the one great throw to Garrett Wilson for the long touchdown, which gave this team a little bit of hope there in the first half. But, when you look at his overall performance, what would you grade it as? Let's start there.
It's an interesting way to put it. I don't know if I was going to give it a letter grade. I'd still probably only give him like a C+, B-, just because, B- might even technically be a lot if you just look at the pure stats.
I think C.
But
C range.
And I think that's kind of the misinterpretation even of my story that I wrote and kind of the reaction coming out of the game. Like everybody's handling him with kid gloves, some harsher things that people said I won't repeat. But like my point was just that like he was not the reason that they lost that game. I still don't feel any differently about him as like an NFL quarterback. I don't know that he's a starting caliber player right now. Like I still don't know that, and the offense is limited. And I think the bigger issues were pass blocking, run blocking, and play calling on offense, and then defense was the biggest issue ultimately. Because you expect Micah Parsons to get his. I think they could have done way more to try and prevent him from getting to the quarterback. It didn't really make sense to me that Hackett didn't really give Dwayne Brown any help. I've seen the argument that like giving help doesn't really do much against Parsons, but you still have to try. Like they didn't chip almost at all. They didn't slide anybody over to help him almost at all. I know they move him around the line of scrimmage, and then maybe this is where Zach Wilson deserves criticism, or like this is the biggest difference between him and Aaron Rodgers. Like Aaron Rodgers at the line of scrimmage should be able to slide the protection over, or change something to where they put Micah in the middle of the defensive line. What are we going to do? I don't know that Zach necessarily has that. Not many do, but he doesn't have the same like ability to see things that Aaron did. But so if you're going to criticize Zach for something, I think it's that. But yeah, I thought, he had that Garrett Wilson throw. They didn't really have the ball very much, which is, they did have some 3 and outs, but ultimately the defense played 83 plays and the time of possession difference was like pretty crazy. So this is kind of Salah's point, like defending some of the things that happened, is that the offense never really had a chance to get into a groove because they were barely on the field. Like I've never seen the defense played like 83 plays. Sauce Gardner was like, that's the most I've ever played. And it's hard to win when your defense is on the field that much. The Cowboys just working their way up the field. But yeah, Zach Wilson, I don't feel any better about him leading this team the rest of the season. But like I said, he had that moment. At the end of the first half was his best drive in a long time. He was pretty quick with the ball, decisive. He didn't make any bad decisions. He scrambled when there wasn't anything there, got some yards, got them in the field goal range. They scored the field goal, and they were down by 8 points at halftime. Then everything went off the rails after that. But, I thought Zach was fine for the first half, and then the second half, as things got out of hand, is when he had some of his turnovers. But at that point, it was, I don't know if you can blame him for trying to make something happen. I think Hackett deserves more criticism than Wilson is what I would say.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too, and Hackett, because we could talk about that when we talk about the other parts of the offense as well. As far as Zach goes, this was in your story today. Check it out on The Athletic. Zach really gets into like the problems and solutions that we'll dive into a little bit here. But Zach, when he's able to get rid of the ball, the numbers break down. So when he holds onto the ball 2.5 seconds or less, he's 17 of 23 for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a 130.2 rating. Best in the league in that situation. That's through mostly 2 games. And then when he holds on to it for longer than that, 9 of 24, 103 yards, 4 interceptions, and a 37.5 rating. It's funny when you think of the two, not funny actually, but when you think of the 2 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, a guy who like can thrive when he holds on to it, right? Can make something happen, can create. But when Zach holds on to it, you see like the decision-making just drops off. Those 4 interceptions are when he's scrambling around and trying to make something happen and trying to do too much, I think. So let's bring that back to Hackett, right? It has to be getting rid of the ball. I'm going to compare. It's going to be interesting this week. One more thing before I go back to you, Zach. This week's going to be interesting because watching the Patriots offense on Sunday night and what they're doing with Mac Jones right now, he gets rid of the ball extremely quickly. And it's a lot of dink and dunk, right? They're not throwing down the field a whole lot. When they do throw down the field, it seems like it's because there's pressure on him and he just kind of chucks it. But he's getting rid of the ball quickly. There's quick outs to the sideline. There's little screen passes, all that stuff. As non-exciting an offense as that can be, is that what the Jets have to be?
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't really get why it wasn't as big of a part of the plan the other day. Like the quick passes, there wasn't really as much play action as there should have been. Like the Cowboys were stacking the box. And, because they're not afraid of Zach throwing the ball down the field or anything like that. But, my whole thing, and this kind of is going to tie into another point we're going to hit on when you hit like one of my other issues, is like getting the ball to the guys who can make plays after the catch. And you do that by getting into them quickly. And Garrett Wilson is number 1 on that list. He did not get the ball enough. Breece Hall, you could argue you can even get him the ball out of the backfield more. I know he's on a limited workload, but still like 4 touches, and we'll get into his comments and stuff. McCole Hardman's barely playing. I think Xavier Gibson even has some elusivity, and you've seen it on the punt returns. I just get rid of the ball, get the ball into your playmakers' hands, and let them do the work. And maybe it's partly on Zach. He's not getting rid of the ball when he's supposed to on those quick plays or whatever. But I think that's the best way to counteract any lack of confidence you have in Zach's ability to lead the team. Like get the ball out of his hands quickly and show that, if he's improved on anything, you would hope he would improve on that. Like maybe some of the other stuff he hasn't, but snap the ball, pass it to Garrett Wilson right away, whatever it is. David Stone has said the Jets need to be more aggressive on first and second down. I agree with that. I think they're playing for field goals, and that's exactly what they did last year. And Hackett didn't really show any creativity this week. They did have that fake punt that Ashton Davis ran for 4 yards for a first down, but then they went 3 and out right after that.
I hated that call because of the field position.
It was a weird call.
Too. Like if you're going to do
it worked, and then it didn't matter anyway. Yeah,
exactly. You're on your own 20. The risk reward is crazy against you, and then it works, and you're still 75 yards away from scoring. I think you keep that in your pocket until you're around midfield, and it's actually going to lead to points.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, just the original point. I think that's been one of the reactions. I didn't get the game plan offensively. Defensively, there's some issues that we'll obviously get into. I don't think any long-standing issues. I think it was more of a 1 week. I think it was more of a 1 week, outlier where they were playing one of the best teams in the NFL. But I think they need to come up with a better, more creative game plan. They need to run the ball more. I would hope that they don't have the ball this little for the rest of the season. Like I hope this is like the low point because the differential was pretty stark. So you'd think maybe that gives Hackett some more space to do different things, and they can air the ball out more and run the ball more. Get it to their playmakers. Get it to your playmakers. Get it to your playmakers. I'll say that over and over again. Like this was the thing at the beginning of last season. Other than they had that Browns game where Garrett Wilson kind of went off, but remember week 1, Garrett Wilson barely played. I think Breece Hall wasn't really getting the ball very much. It was the same thing in like the Bengals game. I think like there's the Packers game. Garrett Wilson only had 1 catch at that time. Elijah Moore, I don't think was targeted. Like, stop wasting your time. Like, get it to your best players. Like, I don't really get what they're doing with that. So I know defenses are scheming to stop them, but Garrett Wilson, even when he's covered, can catch the ball. So you can't. I get that Zach Wilson is very limited, and you're scared of him throwing the ball, but it's like. I think of like they tell you not to like show that you're scared when you're like if you're like scared of dogs, like you're not supposed to like make it clear that you're scared of the dog, otherwise it's going to make them uneasy. I feel like looking at Zach and showing the fear that he's going to mess up is making him like, oh, maybe I will mess up. Oh God, and I don't know that that's necessarily happening, but I think based on their play calling, it's what it is. So I'm not saying they need to open up the playbook completely to what it was there or anything, but they need to do more than they did that week. Like it was a very disappointing game plan, I thought.
Yeah. All right. One more question on Zach for you. And a year ago, this team kind of turned on him. I mean, there's no way around it, right? There was the T-shirts for Mike White. There was hardly hidden comments that were clearly about Zach and what was going on. And you wrote a long story at the end of the season about the complete, breakdown between this team, quarterback, offensive coordinator, all of that. After this game, everybody seemed to have his back. So it's 1 week. Now, this could be for different reasons. So I want your opinion on which of these reasons is why the team is currently still backing up their quarterback. Is it because something they've actually seen in his play over the course of the summer and 2 games? Is it a new attitude from Zach that instills confidence in his teammates? Or is it just complete desperation because they know they have no other option? I hope it's 1 or 2.
I think it's more of a combo of 2 and 3 is what I would say.
Yeah.
Because I do think everybody's made it clear that they think this is a different version of Zach. Like even you saw my story, like we walked in the locker room after the press conferences and Zach was surrounded by like 5 guys. It was Garrett Wilson, all the tight ends. So Jeremy Rucker, CJ Uzomah, Tyler Conklin, and I think Randall Cobb was also there. Garrett Wilson's talking to him for a little bit. Then as Zach's walking away, like Conklin kind of shouts to him, like, we know this isn't the same as last year or whatever the quote was. So I do think there's an aspect of
please show us that it isn't the same as last
year. Yeah. It's like trying to convince yourself, I guess. So I think there's like 3 parts of it. There's he's different mentally than he was last year. He can handle the tough stuff better. I think there's 2, he was not the reason they lost that game. And I think everybody knew that in the locker room and they all said that. And then I think there's 3, they don't have another choice right now and they need to support him. Like, talking smack about your quarterback in week 2 is not going to get you very far. They don't, as of now, they're not signing anybody else. Dakota's like melting down in the comments right now.
Somebody get help to Dakota.
But so, yeah, I think it's a combo of like all those things. progress, maybe whatever. It's like I'm trying to think of like a nice analogy, and all the only mean ones are coming to my head, so I'm not going to say them. But like to be where he was to now, it's like you're not going very far. Like it's not like you were so low that like better is like still doesn't look great, but he's better. So you feel better about that maybe, but in the mental part of it and the confidence, but confidence doesn't really mean much if you're, completing less than 50% of your passes. When he's had some really tough times with the completion percentage. And if there's one stat that I think of the base stats that you can look at and say, okay, that needs to get better, or like that's a sign of a bad quarterback, I think completion percentage is a fair one. I think sometimes if it's really high, it's like overblown, because sometimes guys will dink and dunk and the percentage will be 75% because they didn't really throw it very far. I think you saw that with Jacoby Brissett against the Jets last year. But if you're under 50%, that's a problem. And so Zach needs to get his completion percentage up, and they need to start producing in the passing game. And anyway, I don't have, like I said, like my point coming out of that was just that he wasn't the reason why they lost. If you even look at my story after the game, like late in the story, I'm like, maybe Zach Wilson isn't a playoff caliber quarterback, but he wasn't the reason why the Jets lost. That was the rest of the team. Like that was my point. Like if the Jets are going to beat good teams, it has to be the formula that it was last year. The defense has to be great. The running game has to be great. And you need to have some semblance of like of pass blocking. And if two of those three, especially the first two, are set, then the Jets can win some games, but especially against good teams. But if those things aren't happening, like Zach Wilson is not going to win a game for you. That's just not what he's shown so far in his career. So the pressure is on everybody else to be better, and maybe that sucks for them that they have to, be amazing every week in order to even be considered a playoff team. But that's kind of the reality of the Jets situation now.
Yeah, and it's hard to win in the NFL in 2023 in that scenario where everything but the quarterback has to be perfect. And the quarterback, you look at the great teams, they have the great quarterback that covers up the flaws. This team
totally
has nothing to cover the flaws, so they have to be perfect. Great point. Let's get into problems and solutions beyond the quarterback position, although we're going to start related to the quarterback position, and that is protection. It was bad. We talked about a little bit off the top with Micah Parsons. Now, give the guy credit, right? He seems to be on his way to a Defensive Player of the Year award this year. I think the only thing that might stop him is an injury. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but he just seems like he has everything going. The motivation, the skill, the defense around him. He's just a dominant player. But let's remove that and look at this offensive line as a whole versus other teams they're going to face. Like, what can we take from Sunday that's going to continue to be an issue for this team when they're not facing a Micah Parsons? Because Zach, I'm trying to remember a time when he took a full drop back and had what I would think was enough time to look downfield and find a receiver. And it's hard to think of moments when that happened.
Yeah, that's part of the issue. He was under fire the entire first half when they were still in the game. Dwayne Brown, I think, got most of the flack. Again, while he was not good, and I don't think he's been great through 2 games. I just don't get why you're putting him on an island with Micah Parsons. That I'll never understand that. But so he caught a lot of it, and I think Connor McGovern had a rough game in the middle. I don't think anybody on the offensive line had a great game, I would say. I think AVT even got blown up on one running play. I think Mackay, while he didn't give up any sacks, I don't think he had an amazing game if you go back and watch the film. And Lakin actually,
at least one penalty.
Yeah. And Lakin, I know, gets a lot of flack. I thought that was his most solid game he's had in a while. I know maybe I haven't watched the film like closely to like analyze each offensive lineman, but I don't think he was as bad as people think. I think a lot of it was Dwayne Brown, Connor McGovern were the biggest issues probably. So, I think I've seen a lot of people calling for them to change the offensive line. I don't think that it's going to happen this week. I don't think they're going to bench Dwayne Brown at all. And I don't think that they're going to put Joe Tippmann in yet. You have to remember, one of the biggest issues this offensive line has had is that they have not played with each other. Boy Green just asked the question I was referring to. I've seen people saying about moving AVT to the outside. Dwayne Brown's not getting benched. This team still believes in him. I think they trust him more than they trust Mekhi Becton still. So we're 2 weeks into the season. This is the only 2 games this offensive line as a unit has played together. So pulling out Connor McGovern for a rookie center, I don't know that that's a good idea right now. Especially the Patriots have a good defensive line. Matthew Judon, I think he wreaked havoc on them last year. He's very talented. He's not quite Michael Parsons where you're moving him everywhere, but he's going to present some challenges. So I think they're going to roll with this group for now. Maybe not forever, but for now, wouldn't shock me if at some point they change some things up. But I don't see that happening. I think more the way you cauterize this wound or whatever is you use more help. Like they started out in 12 personnel at the very first play of the game, which they've done both weeks, which is 2 tight ends. And then they kind of went away from that throughout the game. I think CJ Uzomah only played like 15 snaps. Jeremy Ruckert only played 5. Uzomah and Ruckert's primary skill is blocking, and I think Ruckert's a little better pass catcher. But so I think you need to bring out Uzomah more. You need to bring out Ruckert more. You need to bring out Nick Bodden more. Have an extra blocker in there, whether it's on passing downs or running downs. Because the run blocking I thought was arguably worse than the pass blocking. It was really, really bad. There was no holes, and we'll get into Dalvin Cook, I'm sure, in a little bit. Like he has ran into a stacked box quite a bit, and I don't think he has the burst to exploit that. Like even if they're, I don't think he has the Breece Hall level burst to evade that. But the run blocking was brutal from pretty much all parties. I know a lot of people have been saying they should have ran to the right side more with Mackay and AVT. AVT was good, but I don't think that would have necessarily fixed a lot of the issues they had. Like as Connor McGovern said, it was like on every running play, it was like they were 1 block away, meaning like at least one person missed their assignment, and you need all 5 guys usually to survive that stuff. So that's why I think Jeremy Ruckert in particular, who I think was very, very good run blocking in week 1, I didn't really get why he didn't play more in week 2.
You mentioned, that comment about it always being 1 block away. And I found that interesting because he mentioned that it was like always somebody different, right? Like everybody was missing. And it made me think back to training camp and the fact that this offensive line didn't really get to work together at all the entire training camp. That actually in a weird way gave me some hope, Zach, because it was like, well, maybe this is their training camp. They're working out the kinks, and like 2 weeks from now, they're going to have this figured out. Is that fair for me to hope that way?
I think it's fair. It takes time for this stuff, and unfortunately, they didn't have the time in the preseason. And the Jets kind of they tried to act like it was going to be fine. They thought that was overblown, all that stuff. I had some fans getting mad at me for saying it was something to be concerned about. But Mekhi Becton, remember, he didn't even go play right tackle until late in training camp. He didn't get first team reps until the last 2 preseason games, and Dwayne Brown still wasn't playing. So, unfortunately, they're working their way into shape as the season is going on. And some teams have to do that, and that's kind of like the hand they're being dealt. So, how the offensive line looks these first few weeks. Unfortunately, their hardest opponents are arguably these first few weeks, but how it looks this first few weeks might not be how it looks later in the season if everybody's healthy. I still think they can still be a solid offensive line eventually, but if I think this Patriots game is pretty important, so they can't really afford to be the reason they're losing it. And if they are, then I think Joe Douglas gets a lot of heat every time the offensive line struggles, and he'll deserve it, honestly, if this is what ruins their season, because he's invested a lot in offensive linemen, but ultimately he invested in a guy who's 38 years old at left tackle. The Mekhi Becton draft pick is only just starting to look like he's a starting player because he's healthy. Whatever. The money they gave Laken Tomlinson, all that stuff, he invests a lot of stuff, but did he invest it right? We're going to find out pretty soon.
Yeah, and you mentioned Judon, and he doesn't move around as much as Parsons, but he's probably going to be on Brown a lot. So that's definitely going to be a key spot for this week. We'll get more into that, I think, later in the week. All right, next problem and solution, Playmaker production. We talked about Garrett and getting him the ball a little bit already, but let's get back to Breece Hall. 4 touches, and you asked him after the game, and you said in your article that he didn't even let you finish the question. You asked him why the team couldn't get the running game going. He basically cut you off with, I only got the ball 4 times, which not great to have a guy coming off the injury that they've said they're going to work him back slowly, but he's already seemingly a little disgruntled about how many carries he's
getting. Yeah. And look, there's a couple sides to this, and I get all of them. Number one, they're not giving him the full workload yet. I understand that coming off ACL. Number two, they didn't have the ball much, and then they were in a deep hole, and then you had a pass, which was Saleh's excuse. But ultimately, that's not a good enough excuse to me, because 4 touches, that's not just rushes, that's also receiving. He didn't have any catches. So, you need to get the ball in that guy's hands. I get his frustration. It's week 2. You don't love hearing frustration in week 2, but I think I just don't get why teams outthink themselves sometimes. The Jets aren't the only team that does this. Like, get the ball to your best players. Don't overdo it. Like, Dalvin Cook wasn't making a lot happen. Michael Carter played way more than I expected. He was kind of their passing down back. Probably that's because Brees is still working his way back. Like, he was the one on the field for that entire drive where Zach Wilson led them to 3 points before halftime. Play Brees Hall more, or play him the amount you have allotted and get him the ball. Like, there's just not really an excuse. Like, even I think somebody asked him, like, do you think there's a problem with, like, there being a stack box? Like, maybe that's why. He's like, I do deal with stack boxes all the time in this offense. So, like, give me the ball and I'll make something happen. Like, he's very confident, and that's why part of why he's so good. I enjoy Brees quite a bit because he's one of those that is just like, he's honest and he like kind of wears his heart on his sleeve, but he's also really smart, and I think he's mature. And he just wants to, like, at the end of the game, if they had won and he only had 4 touches, then maybe he wouldn't have been upset. But they lost, and he had 4 touches, and he didn't get a chance to contribute to anything really. So, I didn't get not getting the ball. Garrett Wilson only has 14 targets, I believe. I think it's 14 or 15 through 2 weeks. That's not enough. And so they need to figure this out, because unfortunately guys like Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb were better fits in a Aaron Rodgers offense, because those guys aren't going to get much separation. And so Zach Wilson, I don't know if throwing it in his tight windows is a great idea with him. So ultimately, that's why I think they need to play someone like Nicole Hardman more, Xavier Gibson, get the ball to Garrett Wilson, get the ball to Brees Hall, get the ball to guys who can make things happen after the catch. Nicole Hardman in 2020.
Saying
What's
here
that?
about that. Zach Rosenberg has a question here. Not really a 1B on this team right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of my point, lad. So Nicole Hardman, why I don't think he's definitely a flawed wide receiver, but if you look in 2021 and 2020, I think those were his last 2 full seasons. He was number 2 and number 5 in yards after the catch per reception. Like, so he has elite level speed. You signed him because of that. Like, manufacture touches for that guy. I think Xavier Gibson, he's not as fast as Hardman, but and he's an undrafted rookie, and so who knows how it'll look on offense. But these are 2 guys that make plays with the ball in their hands. They can make guys miss, and that's kind of what the Jets need right now, more than an Alan Lazard, who, when Aaron Rodgers is in the game, he's a good downfield weapon because Rodgers can fit into tight windows to him, but he's not fast. Like, he's not particularly fast. He's not going to burn guys. Randall Cobb, middle of the field, he's reliable, but he's not going to, get by anybody. So Garrett Wilson, you can throw the ball when he's covering. I think he's going to go and get it. I don't know that those 2 have that ability. And Nicole Hardman, throw it to him short, let him run, throw it to him deep, whatever it is. Like, I think he should be playing more. This is why you signed him. He's in theory was the replacement for Elijah Moore, and this was kind of the same thing last year. They weren't playing or using Elijah Moore, and I think McColl is faster than Elijah. So that's one fix. It's not a perfect fix because, again, I guess it's not like McCall Hardman's a number 2 caliber receiver probably, but he's a guy that can make plays, and so you need to do whatever you can to manufacture plays and make it so teams aren't just knowing you're going to either run it every play or you're just going to throw it short and throw it for 4 yards and then it's 3 and out. Like, they need to find ways to make things happen, and the best way to do that is get to Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson number 1, and working in Nicole Hardman, I think, is a solution.
All right, one guy who has he's already got the fans turning a little bit is Dalvin Cook. We got this question in from Football Guy. Can the Jets release Dalvin and get out of the remaining $5.2 million in per game roster bonus that they owe him? A little kidding there. Obviously, they're not going to release Dalvin Cook, but it has been very clear through 2 games that this isn't the Dalvin Cook we're used to seeing. And I mean, hopefully it's right there with the offensive line, right? Getting into shape, figuring it out, and they're going to be okay in a couple of weeks. Dalvin Cook didn't really have a training camp either, came really late, coming off the shoulder injury. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing from him so far? Because it's 2 yards per carry?
Yeah, it's not great. I think in NFL's next gen stats, he's in the bottom 5 in terms of rushing yards over expectation. Basically, there's based on the play, there's an amount of rushing yards they should get. Brees Hall is number 1 in rushing yards over expectation, meaning he gets yards that he's not supposed to, whereas Dalvin Cook is negative in getting yards, not getting the yards that he should. And And basically, I think you watch it, he does not have like maybe the burst that he used to. And I think he's somebody that needs better blocking in front of him to make things happen than maybe when he was earlier in his career. But to your point, like he didn't have a training camp and he's a running back. And so he's taking his first hits. I'm hopeful that this isn't like the Dalvin Cook we're going to see in a few weeks. Like I think that you kind of have to be. They paid him to be like a legit guy for them. But yeah, it's been a little disappointing to start. Again, some of it's not his fault. Like I said, he's ran into, I think, stacked boxes, I believe, like 65% of the time or like something crazy like that, according to True Media. So, they paid him a lot of money. So he needs to be better. They're not going to cut him. They're not going to get rid of him. He's got to be here. He's a veteran guy. I think he's a leader in that locker room, and I think they trust him more than the other running backs in terms of like picking up blitzes and stuff like that. Although I don't know if you really saw it. I don't even think the Cowboys blitzed at all, actually. But so they value his ability to help in protection more than maybe Michael Carter or Breece Hall. So there's still some value there. But yeah, he needs to be better. He's not really bringing much to the table right now. And at some point you'd like it to just be Breece Hall is the number one, Dalvin Cook's the number two, and they're kind of splitting carries. I don't know that Michael Carter should be part of that rotation necessarily. I think he's probably more a part of it now because of Breece Hall being worked back in. But yeah, it just kind of ties back to they don't really have it. All of a sudden it doesn't. We went into the season feeling good about their weapons, and now it feels like they only have a couple. So I think part of it's because it was built around Aaron Rodgers' image, and obviously a lot of this team was, and that's kind of the issue they're going to run into on offense. But yeah, I have concerns, but it's too early to panic, is what I would say.
Yeah, it definitely feels like at this point the weapons were better a year ago. When you think about the explosiveness of Elijah Moore and
yeah, even Corey Davis is fairly reliable.
Yep. Taylor just mentioned that in the comment that retirement, maybe we didn't give it enough juice when it happened, but
that's the funny thing about depth. Like people always, when you say like you don't need a certain position, like you can lose depth pretty quickly if you just lose a guy. Like all of a sudden your depth doesn't look so great because then a guy that's supposed to be a backup is starting. So that's kind of the hand they're being dealt. Like I don't think we would have expected Randall Cobb to be playing as much as he is at the start of the offseason. So that's where we're at.
All right. The other big issue was the defense, obviously, which we didn't expect. I thought this would be a real low scoring, grinded out game, and Dallas's offense looked really good. I'll put more of it on the coverage than the D line. Dak, 13 of his first 13. And CeeDee Lamb, though, really just torched the Jets. 11 catches, 13 targets, 143 yards. And you had in your story today, Zach, it's not like he burned one guy. He burned everyone on this Jets defense throughout the course of the game. He caught Sauce, couldn't stop him. Nobody could stop him.
Yeah, actually, Sauce probably did better on him than a lot of the other guys that wound up covering him. But I should say, like, one of the issues was Michael Carter II did get hurt. It wasn't early, though. Like, CD was getting catches right at the beginning, and Tony Adams did as well. So those would be two guys that would be helping a guy who's primarily lining up in the slot.
Eccles had a brutal penalty.
Yeah, that was tough, which came after the BS roughing the passer on JFM. As Jets fans are keen to point out, it seems like they never get those calls in their favor. It's always the opposite direction where they get kind of BS ones. JFM's been the victim of that a few times in the last 2 years.
They probably would have gotten those calls with Aaron at quarterback, to be honest. Those are the calls Aaron Rodgers gets. Anytime you breathe on him a little too hard, he's going to get that penalty.
So I should say, I kind of tweeted about this a little bit today and alluded to it a little in my story. Like, I've seen a lot of calls to have Sauce like shadow the other team's best player, and I totally get that. Like when a guy like CD is killing you as much as he is, I think the Jets thing is they want the other team to adjust to them. They don't want to adjust that's why they never blitz. That's why they always do that rotation defensive line, and that's why they let DJ Reed be on one side and let Sauce Gardner be on the other side, and let Michael Carter II handle the middle of the field. I don't see them changing that anytime soon. But I do wonder sometimes if it's worth adjusting in game if like something's not working, because they were not able to stop CeeDee Lamb, and he didn't really get a lot of resistance on some of those plays. And there was times where, because of the zone coverage, like DJ Reed wasn't on him. Like I remember one vividly where I think DJ kind of messed up, and I think DJ said that, but like it wound up where Jamie and Sherwood was basically like kind of one-on-one with CeeDee Lamb, and that's going to be a recipe for disaster every time. Like a linebacker should not be covering CeeDee unless it's like in a double team. And it kind of goes to they didn't really scheme up Michael Parsons as much as I thought they should. I didn't really seem like they had a plan for CeeDee, especially once Michael Carter II went out, which is hard to blame them for. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as it seemed in week one. I think you kind of saw this last year. Even that Browns game last year, if you remember, that was the last time they gave up 30 points. Like the defense wasn't great that day either. I think Amari Cooper was killing them that day. So I'm if Michael Carter II is healthy, I'm not concerned. If he is not healthy, that is a little concerning because he kind of mans that nickel spot. Unless they plan to move DJ Reed there, which I don't know that they would. That would mean like Brandon Echols, I guess, would come in, or you play a lot more of if Tony Adams is healthy. Like it's a little more concerning if your nickel is not. And that's I think throughout the season, and you saw this last year a little bit. That area of the field is going to be where teams are going to attack them constantly. Like they're going to attack the linebackers in coverage because they've struggled with that, the safeties and the nickel. And Michael Carter does a good job. Like if you look at the stats, he's always going to give up a lot of catches because as a nickel corner, it's like you're not going to prevent them from catching the ball. It's more about if you just prevent them from making big plays. And I think he's really good. So yeah, but anyway, looking ahead, like it's like next week, Patriots don't really have any receivers that scare you. The Chiefs. I'm sure Sauce will get some reps against Travis Kelce. I don't know that he'll follow him, but I think he'll get some reps against him. And maybe he should follow him, honestly, and that's something to talk about as we go into the Chiefs game. But after that, the Eagles have 2 star receivers, so you're not going to have Sauce shadow one of them. The Broncos don't really have anybody that scares you. After the bye, the Giants, maybe Darren Waller, but I don't think you really need to do that because the rest of the Giants' offense isn't particularly scary to me.
The Dolphins have 2
Dolphins
studs.
The next time what I said is week 10 or whatever week it is they play the Raiders would be Devontae Adams. That would be a discussion, and then Tyreek Hill. But they also have Jalen Waddle. So that's the thing. Like that's why shadowing I don't think always makes sense. Maybe they should consider it sometimes. But the Jets defense worked keeping it like this all season last year. It's a long year. I get that you should adjust some weeks, but I also should say like I don't think the defensive line got really home as much as it had the week before. Like they weren't pressuring Dak as much as you would hope. Bryce Huff actually had a good game. He didn't play that much. He had like 4 pressures and like 14 snaps or something like that. Carl Lawson I'm curious to see if that was a workload thing or if he's just a legit backup now because Jermaine Johnson started and Carl Lawson played like less than 20 snaps, I think. Didn't really notice him. Quinnen made some plays, but overall that defensive line did not play as well. And in order for the best way to prevent a guy like CeeDee Lamb from killing you is by getting home. And they weren't doing that as much either.
This one from Peter Yeti about that defensive front. Will McDonald was a healthy scratch. How many teams don't dress first-round picks when he isn't hurt? Makes that pick very questionable. Now, in the Jets' defense, I will say they're loaded as far as that position goes and guys that can put pressure on the quarterback. But the other side of it is in a season where you came into this with Super Bowl aspirations, should you have taken a player at a position that you were so strong at? Like there's 2 ways to view it, I guess.
Yeah, that was kind of the
versus need, right?
That's why all the criticism we gave them after that pick was, I think, warranted at the time. Will McDonald impressed me in camp, but this is why, and I got some flack for even tweeting about this after he was announced as inactive, that it's not ideal to have your first round pick out in week 2 as a healthy scratch. Even if you want to say, what offensive lineman are they going to take? What receiver are they going to take? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that necessarily. And I get the concern. I do think there were some receivers that they could have taken. Maybe the Jets didn't like them, but your first round pick is not active in week 2. And this is a team that the offensive line is a mess. So you see the receivers aren't really making many plays. The linebackers struggling in coverage, whatever it is, there's other areas they could have addressed. And that's a more of a long-term pick. And I'm sure, maybe a year or 2 from now when McDonald's having 10 sacks a year, we're going to say it was a great pick at the time. But in the moment, they had other needs and they used a first-round pick on a guy that isn't playing, and they used a second-round pick on a guy that's not playing so far. So, they didn't have a perfect roster, and that didn't really necessarily help them to start the season. I think Joe Tippmann will start eventually, and that'll look good. But the Will McDonald thing, I think it's fair to criticize them for it. it's too early to say like it was a bad pick necessarily. I just think this is kind of like why we all criticized it at the time, because it's like, what's this guy's role going to be, especially now that when they picked him and the press conferences, even Joe Douglas, who doesn't really make statements like this, was like, we anticipate having a lot of big leads this season, and so when you have big leads, you're rushing the passer. Well, now Aaron Rodgers isn't here, and you're not going to have a lot of big leads probably. So does Will McDonald have a role at all this year? Like that's going to be one of the things to keep an eye on, and especially if Carl Lawson's not even playing a lot. I can't imagine Will McDonald will play a lot over him. So,
anything else from the game for you, Zach, before we get into a look at how people did in picks?
Let's see. Anything else from the game to address? Is there any other questions about the game in the chat?
No, I think we got through all the questions as we went.
I think we cover pretty much everything. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff is just like, I think they need to play Jeremy Ruckert more. I don't think they'll change anything on the O-line.
There was a little chatter about the first round pick that they're going to now get back from the Packers, right? Like, because they assumed that pick was gone, but now that Rodgers going to miss, they'll have that first round pick. Can they or can they not use that pick in a trade?
I don't believe they can, because even though we know Rodgers isn't playing technically until he doesn't officially do it, I think is
right, because he thinks he's playing. So
yeah, so I'm not 100% sure in this, but I imagine they could ask the Packers nicely if it'd be okay if they could use that pick. Packers probably would say, "Why would we help you?" And maybe they could send them a pick to like convince them or something like that. But this is all stuff like the Jets aren't going to trade their first round pick this year, especially now that they're not going to trade for another quarterback of that caliber that would require a first. And so if Zach Wilson is your quarterback, or Carson Wentz or Colt McCoy, you're probably not going to be at the bottom of the first round like you planned. So they need that first round pick, maybe even to draft a quarterback. I don't know. So that first round pick's not going anywhere. I am curious to see if they can get out of this tough stretch with a decent record, if Joe Douglas makes a move before the deadline, because I think it comes in around the bye or a little bit after it.
It's going to be interesting. All right, let's take a look at the picks. These are the results for week 1. Thanks for everybody who signed up. We have a good chunk of people. We're not going to go through all this, but I just wanted to put a highlight on the top of the board. Full stack, Reaper, Jim D75. Feel free to put your real names in there, or kind of like a first name and an initial if you can, because these are kind of.
Let us know somebody is you in the chat at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're in the chat and you had 10 is the leader through week 1. James Sneha 10, Space Cadet 10, and NY Impact 414. So those are the leaders. And Space Cadet and New York Impact actually didn't even pick the Thursday night game. So props to them for that.
Still did well. By the way, do you see this? D. Milner did some picks. Who knew the last Jets top 10 cornerback right there? Yeah, I'm sure that's definitely him.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. He's a loyal listener.
Who we got in last place? We should go to the bottom.
Yep. If we scroll down, though, you got 9, Zach, right?
I got 9. Yeah, I did okay.
I don't know. I couldn't find Marissa really quickly. Connor and I both did 7, I think. So struggling there.
There we go.
If we go to the bottom, 3,
got a couple
MJ
threes.
Pass, 383. Not a good week. Got the Bills, got the Ravens, got the Bucks. That was it.
Pick the Jets, though, it looked like.
Yeah. So work to do at the bottom.
But yeah, keep up with this, guys. And then as if somebody has a really good week, we'll try and like get them on the pod or something.
Yeah, I do. I can email the people as we go. If you have a big week, or maybe through like a certain percentage of the season, we can have whoever's leading the way on right now. Obviously, a big bunch. So good stuff. Thanks for signing up. Make sure you do that pick. Set that reminder. We'll remind you on the show every week too to get them in. The one tricky one though is if we record on Friday and there's a Thursday night game, make sure you get that game in as well. All right, we look ahead to New England. This is Zach. We'll talk about it later in the week, but man, this is 2 desperate teams. It feels like the Patriots have not been terrible, but the schedule has been rough. They opened with the Eagles.
If the Jets were ever going to beat the Patriots, like this would be a great time to do it. Make them 0-3, like that'd be pretty special for Jets fans. And everybody would move on from the Cowboys game.
On the other hand, it's almost hard to imagine, right?
Yeah,
Bill Belichick and company going 0-3. So a lot on the line here in a week 3 game at MetLife against the Patriots. It should be a lot of fun. We'll get all into that later in the week. Do we have any potential guests coming on, Zach? I know we're trying to get more guests.
Potentially Marissa at the very least. Yeah.
That's true. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. Hopefully
Yeah.
we'll get Marissa on to check in, and we will check in with everybody else later in the week, either Thursday or Friday. We'll keep everybody updated on Twitter. Thanks for joining the Can't Wait podcast.